Hi everyone. I know you are excited to see me again on your screen. Today, as usual, I have a very important, highly distinguished professional who who decided to retire into a boarding life as a teacher. But before then, I would like you to hit the subscription button and as well like and also drop a comment. I have here with me Scott. How do I pronounce your surname?
Rosenfelder.
Rosenfelder.
Nice long German name.
He was my consultancy coach. I was privileged to be under his mentorship when I worked with McDonald here at the Expression Learning Center. And from the get-go, I know this is an important personality, and I decided to build that connection immediately. Scott, you're welcome to my show.
I'm completely honored, Chooks. I really am. I'm thrilled to help in any way I can, and it was an absolute pleasure to have you in my class.
Thank you. Well, I know people have, like in the class, as you can remember, we have our various, like everybody has their various interpretation of who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I want us to start from there.
Right.
Who do you think you are? And who do people think you are?
Yeah, it's a great question because in the consulting world, so I spent 40 years in the consulting
40?
business. Yeah, 40 when I added all together, 22 with Deloitte, but 40 total. Where I had my own company, my own software development, and consulting requires you to have a very complex personality types, right? Because you have to really adapt to the situation that you're in, and it's probably one of the things that I feel I'm pretty good at is I read situations and then develop a relationship with that client that aligns with their value system, aligns with the way that they would approach things. So it gives me adaptability. So who I am is a little tricky. I think everyone would see it a little bit differently. The core of what I am is I think I have a really strong value system in the sense of there are do's and don'ts that I will and will not do, right? And actually there's a quote by Martin Luther King that really, I think, really exemplifies what I'm after. He says, doesn't matter what you do, but just do it really, really well. Be the best that you possibly can in that situation. You can't be perfect every time, but the ability to adapt and make sure that we understand that. I think the people that I have really good, strong relationships with see me as an incredibly loyal, good guy, but intense. I'm a very intense individual.
Yes,
I like conflict. I like to go at it. I have a cocky confidence to me at times. And then in certain situations, I can be very introverted. I don't need to be the guy. And so having balance there. So it's a little tricky how people see me. But at the same point, I think I'm there for the people that need me. I'm there for my clients whenever my clients need me. There was no question. I was 100% committed to doing the right thing for them. And same thing with the firm. I was committed to doing the right thing for the firm. So I think those are the values that I have, both personally and professionally, that have always held with me.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is my first time of hearing that you own a company, a software company.
I did, yeah.
Because every time we saw you in class, we saw you as the Deloitte guy.
Yes.
Because
yeah, it's a big image. Deloitte's a big company. It's a big firm.
Do you mind sharing the name of your company? Does it still exist?
Yeah, it does not. It does not. So I started right out of NIU. I got my comp sci degree out of NIU and went and started working at Motorola, which Motorola is a pretty well-known company. They were much bigger when I was working for them. But I knew right away, it wasn't a year and a half into my career with Motorola that I figured I need more. I'm an entrepreneur. My family are entrepreneurs, right? They had their own businesses. And so that was in my DNA or my bloodstream. And so a number of us Motorola associate said, we got to go out. There's this big thing called software development coming around. People needed help building software services. And so three of us broke out from Motorola and got a big contract with a large association in the city of Chicago, big nonprofit association, huge. I can't name them just because of the way the relationship was, but and we developed a software company out of that, a consulting and software development company. Partnerships being what they mean, that was a company called Sunrise Software. And then partnerships being what they were, we all kind of went our separate ways, right? One guy went off and started working for a client. Another guy, he started his own company, and we kind of split. And so then a number of the employees of that company came with me, and we created a company called ClearPoint Technologies. And so that one was, relatively successful in the sense that I had probably 50, 60 clients. I had a number of people working for me. We actually had a software package that we had developed. And again, it was very focused on associations and nonprofits. And then I was presenting at a client, and there happened to be another accounting firm in the room with me. And they contacted me right away after the meeting and said, "You're exactly the company guy that we're looking for to run our technology practice." For this, the firm was called Clayman and Corman. They were what you would call a mid-tier firm in Chicago, probably about 160 to 200 employees. And so I merged my company, ClearPoint Technologies, in with them, and I became the technology leader. I was the partner leading the technology practice. And that was in 1996 that I did that.
1996?
Yeah. So, and then 5 years later, we got bought by Deloitte. So that's how I made my way to Deloitte. So we actually got acquired by Deloitte. So.
But something is evident about you. It seems like with time and with seasons, you keep on reinventing yourself.
It is.
Because
great observation.
Well, I have to admit, by age, you're an old person.
I am. There's no question about it.
By attitude, I don't think you're an old person.
That's very kind. That's very kind. I think it's a great observation. I think that's one of my successes in my career, if I can consider myself having a successful career, is reinventing and being entrepreneurial, right? And I see an opportunity and I go for it. And it's been a core to who I am, right? As I keep changing, I don't have to live on one situation. I know that I can adapt and I can find something new in what I do and be successful at it. I have a confidence factor that I will be successful at what I try to do.
Wow.
So I will stay away from stuff that I know I can't do, right? And that's another thing. I think I keep my confidence and ego in check in that area and say, well, I just don't know that space. Like, I'm not a healthcare guy. I couldn't do the healthcare industry, and that's a tricky business. I've served healthcare clients, but more on a manufacturing and distribution perspective or technology perspective. But I couldn't be in that industry. That's a tough industry and stuff, and it's a big industry. But I tend to stay away from industries I'm not good at.
Okay, can you share a specific strategy that you use, like you employ, to actually reinvent yourself to suit situations and time?
I would say that I read a lot. I read a lot of business news. So I constantly try to stay connected to business things that are happening in the world, especially globally as we've evolved. We're a globalist. It's great that I get the chance to interact with personalities like you. You are not from the US. And I think US Americans can learn from everybody. Because we're such a pocket of an organization. So I feel like I spend a lot of time learning what's going on in the market space, what's hot right now, where things are going, and then I try to visualize how I or a business would fit into that scenario. That's what I brought to Deloitte, and it was an important element to me. So it's staying current, right? Staying fresh, staying current. Don't get sedentary in what you do. Wow.
So can you walk the audience through your career journey, one or two defining moments for you?
Yeah. So obviously Motorola was a great company. I loved working for Motorola. I loved what they did. But I just, as an example, the guy that was literally 4 doors down from me was 35 years at at Motorola, you know, and he had been pretty much doing the exact same thing. And that just wasn't in my purview of what I wanted to be doing. So I jumped into consulting, right? And created these software companies. That was a great experience for me. It was a real challenge. I was married. We were just starting to have kids and stuff. And so that was a real challenge for my wife and I's relationship and it wasn't challenge like, oh, it's hard. She got it. She was committed to it. And so we created these businesses, and they were tough. I mean, there were times when I would come home and I would tell my wife, we're not getting paid this month, right? Because, you know, collections were a little bit off with some of the customers. They were slow on paying. I had to pay the payroll first. And so it was easy for me to skip. And so you learned as a family entity, you learned what was important and all of the elements of nest egg and covering your costs and all that stuff. So that was the thing. If I have regrets in that area, there was a couple of situations where I probably should have been more aggressive. I didn't know at the time, but you know, hindsight's 2020. But I said, boy, I should have done more with the internet, because this is in the creation of the internet days, right? And I was very hardcore in what we would call a server-based environment, on-premise, building databases and software that just sat there. The internet was exploding as we were doing the same thing. So the regret is that I didn't look up enough. I was too focused in that area. I was fortunate that Clayman & Corman came along, I felt, at the right time. It relieved me of some of the burden of making payroll all the time, gave me a bigger client base, and I was continued to able to adapt and really grow on my entrepreneurial process and create businesses. And then the Deloitte one, when Deloitte came in and bought us out, it was a great win for me personally, because Deloitte's a great firm, super people to work for, or work with, I should say, rather work for. You have to work hard at Deloitte. It's a tough business. But great people, and it gave me an opportunity to really grow.
On Deloitte.
Yes.
Because, yes, I don't know. I think Deloitte enjoy employ you as an ambassador.
Oh, yeah? Yeah.
You don't joke with Deloitte.
Yeah.
Even up to now, you don't play with their reputation. You market them to us, even as your student. But I want to ask, what helped you get there? And what actually kept you there? Because I realized not getting to Deloitte, most people have gotten to Deloitte, but staying there.
Yeah. And I had my moments, I'll be honest with you. So in the 22 years that I was there was times where I was like, well, I don't know if I can keep going, right? I had key mentorship in my career. So mentors that I could turn to and ask questions of. And that was really important in my life, right? I had my family that I could bounce ideas off of and stuff. Both my grandfather, my father, and my wife obviously were very instrumental in some of that. But in the professional world, I had mentors that I could really rely on heavily. And at Deloitte, it's an incredibly challenging environment. So it's a lot of stress. It's high stress, but high pay. You know, you're highly compensated if you do well, in general terms, right? And so honestly, Chooks, there was times where I was just like, I'm done. I can't do it anymore. And then I would go in and talk to my mentors, and one of my best mentors, who's rest in peace, he's passed on. He came to me and he sat and listened for a good half hour of me talking about what I didn't like and what was challenging me at Deloitte. And then he finally said, he goes, listen, are you done? Are you done complaining? Because there's 1,000 people that would wish that they were doing what you're doing and get paid what you're getting paid. He says, do what you do well. Get back to that. Stay focused on that. And I would say throughout my Deloitte career, when I had some down moments or dark moments, I would go back to that and say, what do I do well? What do I enjoy that really I get a lift out of? And I would work my way to focus in on that. I would try to do that. And that really is what helped me sustain at Deloitte. And Deloitte, great thing to Deloitte is it gave me the opportunity to do that. I could do those things. So it was great. So definitely find things that you love, because then it's not so much work anymore. It's something that you love and it's that you're passionate about, and it really makes a difference.
So, okay, now looking back at your career,
Mm-hmm.
especially at Deloitte,
Mm-hmm.
do you regret any decision, or is there any decision you wished, if you have a second opportunity, you repeat it?
Yeah, there were certain aspects of there were certain clients that I had that I wish I had pushed harder in, right? That I think I could have had greater success if I had toughed it out, right? But Deloitte, there's a lot of distractions. You can go find a new client pretty easy. And I wish I had a couple of really big core clients that I thought I could do really, really well with. But then you hit a bump in the road and you say, boy, the stress of making your numbers, and hopefully that makes sense to the audience. But, we had goals that we had to hit. We had sales goals that we had to get. I had to sell the work that I delivered, right? And if I'm off a couple of $1 million on my sales, I had to go find those sales. And so I would say that I took an off ramp and found those sales someplace else when I think I could have stayed in a spot and ultimately developed a much bigger relationship. And then I would probably had even greater success. So there's some regrets at Deloitte. I do like the moves that I made. I moved through a couple of different. I had a national role, which meant I had a national expertise that was valued by the firm. And so I went around both globally and nationally and visited offices and spoke, visited clients, important clients, and did a lot of speaking. And I enjoyed that. That was a good period of time. And it was a good respite. It got me off of the hitting a sales bogey or hitting a sales goal and a delivery goal. And that was a good time for me, but it slows your career down when you do stuff like that. So there's a couple of things that I would do, but ultimately I'm pretty happy with the decisions I made within Deloitte. But I think I could have made some better decisions. But I am a true believer in hindsight's 2020. When you look back, there are regrets, and you got to learn from those regrets. That's what I try to do each time and every time.
Wow. One thing is very obvious about you. There is this passion and knack to give back to the society.
Oh, that's kind.
And one of the ways you do that is mentoring young people. And I'm one of your beneficiaries.
Yeah.
Looking at your time when you started your career, and looking at how we, the younger ones, are actually approaching the professional world.
Yeah.
Is there anything you are seeing as a bane or an impediment towards this generation quest to achieve success in their career?
Yeah, I do think that's there. I think when I looked at that was another great question that I think is a challenge for your generation. I really do. My generation, being an older person, right, I'm a baby boomer. And so the baby boomer generation was very focused on getting married, getting a house, making money. It was very, very focused on that. That was what we did, our generation. And all of my friends are in the same boat. That was the goal there. And I think what I find for your generation and this younger generation, first of all, I think you guys have a phenomenal amount of distractions that I think is a challenge, right? Social media, the internet, you could name a bunch of different things that we just didn't deal with, right? I mean, I'm old enough that I remember the development of the cell phone, the mobile phone, right? And that, we didn't even have that. I had, voicemail. We didn't even have email at the beginning of my career, right? It was all just coming on and stuff. And so our life was much more simpler and very focused on that. You guys have a lot of distractions. And I think sometimes those distractions can be significant distractions. There's this FOMO, this fear of missing out, that maybe I should be doing that and not this. And you see that. And I think that's a distraction. The other part that I struggle with some of the young people is this level of easiness, the ease of getting a hold of answers, right? What they think to be or what they perceive to be answers. And I know that we talked about this in our sessions too, in our graduate team and our research team. Critical thinking is a really important part of business, right? You have to challenge the situation and you have to say, wow, is that really the end goal answer? And I find that the younger people, the younger generation that I deal with in school, don't do that much critical thinking. They get something off the internet, they Google something and they say, oh, that's the answer. And it's just not that way. So my big push, and I've pushed you guys were a phenomenal team, was like, Let's really dig. Let's make sure what we're looking at is the real deal. Number one. Number two, is there a better way to do it? Always challenge. Don't accept the first answer type thing. And so I find that the young people, and third, the biggest one too, is the pandemic. The pandemic changed the game. It changed the way people operate. It changed the way that people react to each other. And that's a tough one. I think the world is still learning from that one. I think there's still some evolution that needs to go on there.
Okay.
So
I have another question.
Sure.
While you were talking, I felt like the need to ask you this question.
Sure.
As someone coming from a developing country and trying to acculturate into their American system, I know you have worked with people of different cultures and colors. What do you think is the major challenge, like working with them, and how have you watched one of your colleagues overcome this challenge by doing something differently?
Yeah, I don't find it to be a challenge. A challenge of working with them, only because my intent, didn't matter where I was going in the world. I've worked throughout South America. I've worked throughout Europe. I've had clients in Europe, Eastern Europe, Southeast Asia. Just about everywhere I've been. And I've been very fortunate. I feel very blessed that I've seen a lot of those things. I have not worked in Africa at all, but I've been in those countries and stuff. And I think one of the things that I look at, my approach is, I need to learn from them, right? So I get America. I was born here. I was raised here. We Americans do things certain ways. And I always like to get feedback from my international friends on, wow, you Americans, I love that statement because it gives me a chance to learn. One of the things that I always found was that if I'm in their space or in their country, there's culture, there's elements that they live by that I have to align with. And that's important to me. It's really important to me. I think when we come into the US, when individuals like yourself come into the US, you bring that level of culture and difference to the table. Some Americans don't adapt well to that, right? They think America is America, right? One of the things I taught my kids right away is it's a big world out there. There's a lot that we need to learn. I grew up in a very small town that had, everybody knew everybody. Everybody knew my name and I knew their names and stuff. And when you get outside of that bubble that we live in, and the United States is a bubble, there's no doubt about it. When you get outside of that bubble, you have to adapt and learn. Like I said, my career has been about adapting, changing and stuff. So I think it's difficult for students like you to come in, and I don't think it's difficult for you to differentiate. I think you guys differentiate well. But there is an alignment that you have to drive at, right? That can you do the job in an American company? And I think that's a little bit steeper climb for you guys. And I find that difficult, which I think is hard on you guys, on international students to come in. And there's challenges out there. There's racism in our country that we have to try to deal with. And there's elements there. I always try to look at it as the quality of the individual. Good people have good friends, right? That's what I really believe in. And good people will do the right thing. I think in general, people want to do the right thing, always. And I believe in that. I really do. I think the people that work for me, but I've found people that aren't good people too. And, then you got to deal with that. But internationally, you guys have a tougher road to hoe in the US because you have to come off as Americanized sometimes. And that's tricky. That really is tricky.
Oh, okay. Another part which I know would interest the audience is the internship. It's a very, everybody wants to land an internship, especially business students. And it's becoming very difficult to get one.
It's highly competitive.
Yes, out there. So, but what strategy do you think one should employ to land internship or a job in a top firm? So
the internship strategy, you need to figure out how to differentiate yourself, right? So what makes you unique? Where are your passions? I think people that show their level of passion in their resume, that show their level of passion in their interview process, can differentiate. I think that shows, for me personally, that shows a broader personality type, right? That say, hey, this is what I like to do. This is what I'm interested in, right? In fact, I'll use you as an example. One of the first things when we met for the first time, we were talking about, dress in the meetings and all that. And you asked if I had an issue with you wearing some of your home.
Yes.
And I'm like, no, I would love it because I think it brings culture to the business. I like that. I mean, that's what not all American businesses look for that, but I think many do today. I think we're better today than we ever have been. But you took the risk,
Yes.
I guess, of asking that question. Great. That's who you are. And immediately you established yourself as somebody that, hey, I've got beliefs. I want to make sure that we're all on the same page, right? You have to have a strategy when you're going into an internship. How do you make yourself look different? And then the biggest one is perseverance. You just have to persevere, keep trying. There's a be persistent without being annoying is really a tricky one. So you have to do well in school anymore because a lot of companies, that's what they do, they deviate on is where do we cut off on what students we look at. But then I look for broadness of their skill sets. What have they been doing? If they're just really hardcore students in the Deloitte world, I don't think they're going to be good consultants because they have to be adaptive to scenarios and situations. I think like you as a person would be a very good Deloitte person because you look at that, you've seen a big world, right? And you've seen a lot more than some of the students. And NIU is a pretty small campus, right? From that perspective. So learn to differentiate yourself and find, probably the other, kind of secret sauce is find what they're looking for. Try to figure out how to work for them. Networking is everything in internships. You got to have inside connections, right? And you can't be afraid to ask others, right? I've told all of you guys, boy, if there's a company that you're interested in, I might know that person only because I've been around for a long time. You never know. And I could drop a note into somebody. I know almost all the big four people in the big four and the mid-tier consulting firms. I can drop a note. And that's another great way in. So network.
Okay, as someone who has been who has worked in different organizations and I have seen the recruitment process, what is that one skill that is high value?
Communication, I think, is really, really important unless the role itself doesn't require good communication, right? So I think communication, being able to communicate really well and articulate your thoughts, right? I struggle with students and employees that just can't get to the point, right? Especially in a high stress environment, like a Deloitte environment, you got to get to the point. What are the challenges? One of my sayings, in business, we all have these sayings. And one of my sayings is, don't tell me what I want to hear. Tell me what I need to know, right? That's one, right? So tell me what I need to know. Bring bad news. Be confident in bringing bad news thing. But number two is when there's a challenge and a problem, your opinion is very important. Bring an understanding of how you might deal with the issue, right? So when you bring it to a manager. So I think that has to come out in the interview process, right? Is I know there's going to be challenges, but I also know that I can deal with challenges, right? I have a confidence in my ability to relate and also adapt and come up with a solution set. I think those are important things that somehow you have to bring that out. And that's tricky. There's no doubt about that, tricky, but think of ways to bring that out in the discussion.
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah.
On communication.
Yes.
Even before we started these postcards, I have told you that you are one of the best communicators I've seen so far. And it's a skill that I cherish so much.
Yeah.
And you can tell that from the get-go, I asked you a question about communication, even in the class. And I think if you observe carefully, based on how I'm talking now,
right,
you understand what I'm saying even much better. But how do you improve? I know, did it come to you naturally or you worked on it?
It did not. It worked on it. So I was a ComSci programmer to start with at Motorola, right? And so I was writing lots of code, and code's very heads down. You're in the program. You're getting your feedback. Really is the way that the program's working and stuff. But I noticed the people that I really liked. My father was a really good communicator. My grandfather was an exceptionally good communicator, and I was, those two were really heroes in my life, right? It was my grandfather and my father. And they were very good at what they did. They were prominent business people in our town, and so I had that to emulate off of, which I think is a thing. I wasn't that person out of the gate. I had an older brother. He was a pretty sharp guy, and so you live in the shadow of that. So it took me time to develop. But I found what communicating, if you are able to communicate in an articulate way, in a succinct way, get to the point, but also bring a level of articulation and intelligence to that discussion, you will excel. And so that took time for me to figure out. And then I truly believe my memory is a little bit of a sponge. When I see something that works really well, boy, I put it in, I departmentalize it and park it really good. I learn from my mistakes and try to evolve. I still am at 65. I still learn from my mistakes, right? And so I try to get better at those things. And so it takes time, but find somebody that can be a mentor or somebody you want to emulate that you think, I do, like I said, I read, I follow business news. There's CEOs that are just off the charts, incredibly good at what they do and the way they communicate. And I try to feed off of that is really what I do.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, good.
On something very important that I've observed about you is that you are heavy on family.
Mm-hmm.
And you started your family at a very early age.
I did.
And even at that, because here in the United States, one of the major social problems is the issue of divorce.
Yes.
And you have been able to maintain the balance. You have succeeded professionally and you're also succeeding even as a family man.
Yeah.
How did you achieve this balance?
I have to give I was very fortunate. So I lived in a very, a really solid community environment that my parents were super supportive of who we were as individuals. They own their own businesses, so there's an advantage there. There's no doubt about it. You can call it a privilege, you can call it whatever. I had that opportunity. That was good. And then as we started to get out into a broader world, and the globalization of our worlds started to come together, my wife and I connected at a young age. We were 21, I think, when we first started to date, and got married a couple of years later. And I think there was great communication of vision of where we wanted to go, what we wanted to do. We had a plan. We actually executed on a plan. We said, listen, we're going to both, we both got our degrees. We're going to go start our careers. Let's see where that goes. We wanted to buy a house before we had kids. We were doing the baby boomer thing, get married, buy a house, have kids. We had a timeline that we were working on. So I think that gave me foundation that I was able to build on. I still, to this day, and I know I said it in class, that if I didn't have my wife and kids, I probably would still be kind of goofing off. I'll be honest with you. I'm a guy. I just want to go play golf or play tennis or play sports, and that just changes the dynamic. For me, it was a real positive thing. It really gave me motivation to do better. And then as kids came along, I needed to be a role model for them. Just like my father and my grandfather were role models for me, I needed to be a role model for them. And so it was really, really important to me. It to the core important to me that I did the right thing for them too. And I used those as personal motivation and what drove me to be better and stuff. So my wife and kids, I give them 1,000% all of the credit for anything that I've succeeded with. Because they've been the motivation behind what I do.
Okay, thank you. There's something you mentioned in the class that led to a mini interview.
Yeah.
All of us interviewed you.
Yeah.
When you said something like you are irreligious.
Yes, I'm not a religious person. I don't know if I'm an atheist, but I'm really close. I believe in evolutionism. I'm a science guy. I'm a history guy. So there's aspects of that are probably part of my core.
And your wife is quite opposite.
The exact opposite, right? Completely believes is a strong Catholic personality, believes in the Catholic Church and attends regularly and is super supportive of the Catholic Church.
So how did this shape your marriage? And from your conversation, you're high on value.
Yeah.
and you always see yourself as a role model, and you try to present yourself as
Right.
And most irreligious people are being perceived as people who doesn't have value.
Yeah, I don't know why that.
So how
yeah.
did this actually shape your marriage and everything?
I think the big thing for me personally, and I'd love for you to interview my wife too, that she might have a whole different perspective, but I think it gave me, I needed to be open-minded. So my family was not a religious family. We didn't attend church on a regular basis. We started, but my dad's business was 7 days a week, and so it was tricky. And so I think it provided me an open-minded. Wow, I saw how she worships, how she devotes herself to the religion, and I needed to be open-minded about that. Was her value system. And, sure, does it create some conflicts and elements? Yeah, but that's life. Life is hard, right? And so she gave me the openness to say, I'm not. And I wanted to give her openness to say she can be, right? I never say, why are you wasting your time with that? I never say that, because I think church is a great thing. I think religion is a great thing for those that want it to be, right? And it's a great value system, and it can be, right? So, and so I think it's being open-minded, right? And say, hey, if that's what you believe and that motivates you in life, makes you a better person, go for that. That's what you should do. I think that's one of the things I think Americans are good at is saying, hey, I think I can be really good at this. Let's go and stuff. Nothing holds us back from that perspective. And so that was difficult. Has it created conflicts? Every once in a while, I'm not great. When my kids were younger, I wasn't great at saying, yeah, you should do the church thing, right? I'm like, hey, make your own decisions. And sometimes that's not a great response and stuff. So, but it was good. It was good.
Okay. Would you, if you are given a second opportunity, even though you will not be given a second opportunity,
right?
Just an assumption. I'm just in case your wife is watching this.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah, that's a good statement.
Would you actually marry a religious partner?
Yeah. Again, I think attractions are different, right? So I am completely infatuated with my wife. She is. I just am attracted to her in all ways, right? And so I think that's just true. That's she hits me, she gets me, and the whole thing. And so I don't think religion gets in the way of that at all. So would I change that? I wouldn't change that at all. I think I actually learn better from someone that's different from me. Do like personalities attract? Yeah, I think opposite personalities attract too. There's aspects that she brings to our relationship that I don't have. Like I said, she's the greatest gift of gab. She can talk to anybody, anywhere, at any time. I'm a more reserved communicator. When I'm in the moment, and you see me, because I have to take the lead role, I will communicate. I will do that. But if I'm in a situation where I don't have to, I'm not the lead person. It's not about me. It's not about me guiding or anything. I don't have to talk. It's really easy for me to sit back. She's a phenomenal. I would bring her to client events because she could go talk to any client of mine and make me look better right away. So I wouldn't change a thing. I really wouldn't. I don't think religion's a core play there. I think it can strengthen a relationship. I don't want to take that away. I think if two people have we have some very good friends that are very devoted to their religion, and they bond with that. And do I think that's a miss on my wife and I's part? Maybe because of who I am and stuff. And I think that's a strength that they have, but I don't think it inhibits us by any stretch.
Okay. Well, all the time you talk about your wife, you speak highly of her, and that is why she has a lot of fans. In fact, all your students are fan of your wife.
That's good.
And also, no, I'm not your fan. I'm a fan of your wife.
You guys even met her. I got to figure out how you guys meet. So.
I know you are not jealous, right?
Yeah.
Do you think, and she's a good person, obviously.
Yes, she's a great person.
Do you think, do you agree that religion actually played a great role in making her the good person she is?
Yeah, there's clearly the value system that she believes in is very in line with her religion. There's no question about that. She has strength in that, and I see when she's having tough days. We all have tough days, but when she's having a tough day, her religion can play a strong role in it. Her parents were very dedicated religious to their religion and stuff, and so she emulates that. My wife and I were both blessed with really, really strong, influential parents, right? And so our core is really based on that, right? And so I think that she is who she is because of her value system and her religion. I truly believe that and stuff. And maybe I should tell her that more often. After 40 years, we stopped telling each other that stuff, and maybe I should tell her that more often and stuff. So
okay, I'm giving you an opportunity now.
Yeah.
To send a shout out to her.
Be
romantic this time around. Don't be a conflict person here.
Yeah,
this is not Deloitte.
There you go. There you go.
Look at the camera. Okay. Against your wife. Talk to her.
I would say, Marianne, you've been the motivation behind everything that I've done. My success is 1,000% committed to who you are as a person and the support that you've provided me over 40 some years of a relationship. And I think the addition of our kids was just an accelerator of that whole environment. So between her and my children, I think, whatever success I've had, I relate 100%, 1,000% to having them in my lives and having them really motivating me to be a better person and drive at those things. And so she's been the core to that. There's no question about it. When I've been traveling all over the world, she's been super supportive of my career and doing the right thing. When I had to leave a vacation early because I needed to do, Deloitte was calling me, she was like, I get it, go do it, get it done, just do it the best way you can, and all that. So phenomenal. I've been very blessed with a phenomenal support system so that I could focus almost 100% on my career at times. And especially when we owned our own business, it was hard. Those were hard discussions. I'd come home and say, we're not getting paid, or we lost a client, and she was always there. She was always supportive. She never second guessed any of that. And I appreciate that very much.
Wow. I don't know you're this romantic.
I'm not, actually. You asked me to be, you asked me to communicate, and I wanted to. So that's probably another problem. I'm not that romantic. So
it's okay seeing you being vulnerable.
Yeah. So we are who we are. So, and it is developed by our environment. So.
Okay. There's a particular question I'm about to forget.
Okay.
And that's the question. You have worked for 4 decades in the professional world.
Yeah.
You already retired, and you retired back to here at NIU, where you all started up your life.
Right.
Can you tell us why you choose NIU?
Yeah, so both my wife and I graduated from NIU. So we're Huskies. We graduated from the University of NIU. Yep, Huskies. We're Huskies. I've got a really good friend that I used to coach with. That he's an employee out here. So I was active on a couple of boards out here throughout my career. And connecting with him. And so NIU's always been a part of our lives, right? And then my oldest son, he came out of Indiana University and he wanted to get into an MBA program. And he looked at NIU, and I was fortunate. I had a great relationship with Denise, the dean at the time. I reached out to her. She helped us through the whole process. I was very lucky. She helped us, guide us through the process. And so my son got his MBA here. So we have 3 dedicated Huskies in the family. When I retired, and I retired because of the pandemic. The pandemic was an opportunity that hit. I was gonna retire in the next year. The stress levels were getting off. All of this gray hair that I have is stress levels from Deloitte. Stress levels were getting really, really high. So I was gonna retire anyways, and then the pandemic hit. And so I had an opportunity to step away. And so we did. We took that opportunity to step away. I wanted to give back to the university. Both my wife and I enjoy being out here at NIU and being part of the events at times. We had football tickets. We were pretty active. We're not as active as a lot of NIU alumni, and so I wanted to give back. I also, I've been a hardworking person since I was 14, right? And working for my family, and then getting into my career and stuff. And so there was an aspect of me that wanted to continue on, but with less stress. And so I came out and had lunch with the dean of the business school at that time, and said, hey, I've got some free time on my hands. I would love to help out. And they said they needed help in this experiential learning center, which is consulting, right? This is what we did at Deloitte, which is great. I get a chance to meet really successful students like yourself. And then they asked me to do some undergraduate stuff. And I took it on. I can't believe how hard it is. It was amazing. I was overwhelmed at the beginning, and I've nothing but enjoyed it ever since. So that was the reason it really was to give back. The university gave us what we have today, and I wanted to give back to NIU.
So it's not because of the money or anything?
No, I wouldn't. They don't pay me enough to do this.
I know.
So it's all that's passion there.
I know.
That's
and sometimes you become a driver. You drove us to Chicago last time.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I become a chauffeur for the DLC class. Yes. So, no, it's been a great experience, and it's a way for me to help NIU out. I look at in Dennis Barcima. We talked about Dennis Barcima and Barcima Hall. Dennis is an incredibly successful guy, right, from his career. And what did he do? He gave back to the university. There's a number of folks that I know in the alumni group and stuff that have just given back to the university. And I find that that's a great experience. I feel good about that, right? And this is my way of giving back to the university too.
Thank you. Without you returning back to NIU, there is likelihood I will not know you. There is likelihood I will not know how to do well as a consultant. There is likelihood that I will not know McDonald's.
Yeah, McDonald's, a great client.
Yeah, and the way they valued our work.
Yeah,
is because of you.
Oh, I don't know about that. You guys did really good work.
So thank you very much.
Yeah, it was an absolute pleasure, Chooks. Absolute pleasure. So, and I wouldn't have continued to do it if I didn't have students like you. Honestly, that's a real truth.
And finally, thank you for honoring my invitation.
Yeah, my pleasure.
This is you're a big personality, and you are humble. I know Amira will have a contrary opinion. I understand.
Yeah.
But I think you're a humble man.
I can be. I don't like too many compliments. It starts to get to me after a while. So I do have to say to the audience, this is a great guy. This is a great guy. I was completely honored and touched that he asked me to be on this podcast.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Absolute pleasure. Thanks so much.
All right.